Hi guys, welcome to Dead by Tomorrow Interviews. My name is Daniel Winter and my co-host is Andrew Monroe. As we explore different topics that are worth thinking about today, we want to bring in guests to share their own unique perspective. We hope you enjoy hearing from our guests as much as we enjoy talking to them. Hi guys, and welcome back to the Dead by Tomorrow podcast. This is Daniel introducing our special guest for this week. And Andrew told me that when it comes to family, I have to do all of the introductions. He doesn't want to, create family drama or things like that. I'm not really sure. But this week we have Christy Winter coming on to the podcast. She is my youngest sister, and she is a lab analyst at Servitech. So she's a girl scientist, which our mom is very proud of. Our mom is proud of all of us, but I think we're going to maybe find out this episode who she's the most proud of. Since we've talked to Christy, we've talked to Beth, and we can just look at the number of listens, since Susie probably makes up 75% of our listening stats. So Christy, welcome to the podcast. Excited to have you on. How's the day going?
It's pretty good. It's a chill Sunday. Not much going on.
You don't work on Sundays? You get to chill?
Yeah, I get to chill. Just Monday to Friday.
Okay. Let's dive in a little bit around what you do for work, how you got there, really just your whole life story, but you've only got about 30 seconds to share it.
Okay.
I'm joking.
Not prepared for that.
It's actually 15 seconds.
Oh, God. Well, I got my degree in chemistry, minor in Spanish and math. I graduated and I didn't have a job yet, so I was panicking. I almost signed up to go to nursing school, like one click away. And then I just emailed every lab in Amarillo who their manager had their email public because I was desperate. And Servitech emailed me back and I interviewed and it went fine. And so I was really glad that they gave me a chance. And so they're an agricultural lab. So we do testing for farmers, ranchers, and some city work. And generally just like lab work, you get your sample, you prep it in whatever way it's supposed to be prepped, you run the analysis, and then you report your results. So I feel like people don't really know much about lab work other than just what they've seen in the movies. But the sampling technique is really important, at least for our work, because in agricultural stuff, it's like it can be very heterogeneous. Like your soil can be completely different in one part of your field than another part. So you have to be careful and make sure you get a sample that's representative of the entire field. And we also do feeds and plants and waters and all that. And it's important for every aspect, but I mainly do soil.
So when you're running these samples, is that, what are the farmers using that for? I mean, is it high tech enough where it's, all right, we are going to grow this type of crop in this type of area. We're going to use this type of fertilizer with this type of area. We, need our animals to not be in this soil because of X, Y, Z, or what are the primary uses?
Those are all things that they consider. So depending on the type of nutrients that are in that soil, the texture, the pH, that'll determine what kind of crops you can even grow there. And you don't want your animals in a certain part that could be high in nitrate or prussic, because that can kill them if it's high enough concentration. But normally it just causes like intestinal distress. And
wait, does it kill them because they're eating what's growing out of the soil, or they're eating the dirt and it has too much nitrate? Like, that kind of sounds scary.
It's the feeds, I'm pretty sure anyway. I don't think they're just eating the dirt, but if feeds are like too high in prussic, which is cyanide, or nitrate, it can kill the animals and humans if it's high enough, but we're more like, we can handle it better than them. So it's very high tech, actually. Like, they use it for a lot of things. There's a lot of information that we give them, and they have agronomists that tell them like what fertilizer they need to use in what parts of the field, and they have a whole map of their field a lot of times, and it's like shows the areas that are higher in nitrate, higher in phosphorus, whatever they asked for the test. And so it can determine, what crops they can grow there or what fertilizer they need to use there and stuff like that. And it's all part of the investment that they make, because farming is really like a very high dollar industry in America. And so this whole part of the lab work is part of their investment, which then they can make a return on, later when they harvest.
I don't know if you've ever seen the show. I think it's called like 10,000 Ways to Die or something like that. It sounds like you should see if they'll let you on the show as like a guest scientist, and then it's like an episode where this person just like drops dead, and then you explain that they died because there was too much basically cyanide in the feed or the soil around them.
I mean, that would be interesting. I think it would just scare people into not eating plants.
I mean, that's the whole point of that show, is to scare people
yeah.
from mundane things.
Yeah. I did watch some of those episodes, and it did scare me. I didn't touch an electrical pole for years.
Hold on. Are you saying you touch electrical poles now?
I mean, the wooden ones? I didn't think there was anything wrong with them.
I just see Christy running down the street just slapping these wooden electrical poles.
I used to lean on them. I would wait for my friend. Yeah. It was a little hangout spot.
Okay. You had cooler friends than us. I don't think we ever went near anything electrical. We didn't exactly grow up. You mostly hid, and we talked about this on Susie's episode, actually, where we never really saw you if Daniel and I were doing anything. But with that said, I never really thought, there's a scientist hiding in the back bedroom from us. Was this a career path you were planning on taking, or what kind of took you from where you were at as a child to where you're at as an adult? Was there a bunch of jumps and twists and that fell into your lap, or were you kind of angling this direction?
I would not say that I was angling there. I just think I fell into it. I think it's because I was naturally good at math and science, and I was horrible at reading because I couldn't concentrate. I've gotten a lot better, but it was bad there for a while. And so I was like, I guess I just need to do something in math and science. That's what I'm good at. So I just started out there, and then eventually just got my degree, and then was like, well, don't know what to do now. So just fell into it. Wasn't like a long passion for me that I had been wanting to do my whole life.
That is so foreign to me, like falling into a math and science field. I couldn't imagine in a million years me just being like, I just couldn't figure out what to do, and I just ended up doing a hard, like, science, math focused career degree. Like, that just would not accidentally happen to me. I actually make a lot of intentional choices that avoid such areas. So that's really cool, though. It's so interesting.
That's the general consensus when I tell people what I did, what I majored in.
So saying that, do you fall more in line with you like doing like hard math? And I mean hard not in a like difficult sense, but in a very strong math sense, or do you fall more on the hard science side?
I definitely like math more. It's always true. It has a lot more sense to it, whereas the science is like, sometimes atoms will act this way, but sometimes they act this way, and I don't like the guessing aspect of that. Very theoretical. Maybe if it was like physical chemistry, because that's a hard math base, but yeah, a lot of my chemistry classes were very just, you had to imagine what all these little atoms looked like, and I need to see something on paper or like in front of me. I need to see it happening, so that made it a little difficult. So I'm definitely more of a math person, I think.
Okay. So now do you use more math or more physics, I guess you could say? We're going to use physics as a very broad category for things that are chemistry and whatnot related. I'm going to have someone shoot me after this episode. But
I mean, there is a lot of physics in chemistry. So I use a spectrometer. I would say I probably used my degree maybe 20 to 50% of the time. You could probably just follow instructions and do my job, but once there's a problem, then you would need a little more information to fix it. So I think it's probably more physics-y chemistry than math, for sure. The math side is just in the software. It does it itself with all the equations. I don't do any of that. So I just plug the number in and then it runs it for me.
What an unfortunate twist of events then for you.
So in your job, I feel like most jobs have, you come across different stories like, oh yeah, this time this crazy thing sort of happened to me and all of that. And so what have been some of the either crazy coworker situations that have happened, or has there ever been a moment where you're like, guys, y'all have to see this sample that we just analyzed? It's doing some weird stuff. What are some of the things that stand out to you?
Well, one time I'm pretty sure I made cyanide in the lab by accident because I used the wrong thing when I was making a reagent. And then all of a sudden, we all started coughing, and it was right when COVID hit. So we were like, what is happening? Are we all sick all of a sudden? And then I turn around and I look at my volumetric flask, and I had it on heating too, which is even worse because it was just making everything bubble over. And I was like, oh my God. I just rushed it into the hood, and I was like, please don't fire me. But my supervisor's super chill, and she was just laughing and was like, well, if there was any COVID in our lungs, I guess it's dead now.
From cyanide.
Yeah.
That's the cure we've been looking
I mean,
for.
I don't know that it was cyanide, but it could have released some cyanide particles, possibly.
Well, Princess Bride is, build up that resistance, Next thing you know, I'll be running around in a mask fighting Italians or Sicilians.
Exactly. I mean, there you go.
Creating cyanide is almost certainly not something that anyone else we've ever had on the podcast can claim to have done.
I mean, I was cleaning out my cabinets the other day, and I literally found a bottle of potassium cyanide. I was like, this is not okay. This should be stored somewhere safe and away from like public consumption areas.
So, does that mean that you know how to make a range of different poisons and toxins?
I mean, I guess I could if I just looked it up, like on Google. We'd have the materials for sure.
So you could just do a Walter White, like Breaking Bad sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Every time I tell somebody that I have chloroform, they're like, can you chloroform me? I'm like, no. I don't know why, but so many people want to be chloroformed just to see what it's like.
Raise his hand.
Exactly.
It's mostly just because of community. Otherwise, I wouldn't have that much of an interest in it.
That's fair. Well, it's really easy to make too, so.
I'm getting a little bit scared now knowing the things that you have access to and the things that you know and all the jokes that have been made sort of at your expense throughout our childhoods. I just
the true reason I became a scientist.
I'm glad that I think everybody's on pretty good terms now.
So far as you know.
Christy's playing that long game.
Yeah. Patience.
So I'm going to pivot away from soil and cyanide for just a little bit, and we can 100% go back to that. And I'm sure Andrew has questions about poisons and things, but we did just have Doug on, and we talked to him a little bit about baseball. And one thing that I asked him about was how in the world he convinced you to become a baseball fan, because I remember us watching, I don't know, random TV shows and movies like Superstar with Will Ferrell. I don't think we watched a single second of sports together growing up at all. And so once you became a baseball fan and a Yankees fan, I was like, what the heck? Like, when did this happen? And so Doug told us the story about how it happened, but I'm curious from your side, what was it that made you a baseball fan? Like, how did Doug pull that off?
It was a very slow burn because we dated for 5 years before we got married, and I'm still probably like only 30% the fan that he is, and I'll never be as much of a fan as he is because he's crazy. But I just like live sporting events, so I'm cool to go wherever. I mean, maybe not golf because that sounds super boring, but anything interesting. And so he took me to a bunch of baseball games, and eventually I was just like, yeah, this team seems cool. They have a lot of history and cool people, Babe Ruth, all the players that you always hear about. So eventually I just started liking them. But I don't know. What did he say? I'm interested.
We can hold that hostage if you want. The episode did release today.
Oh, yeah.
No, he said it was an ultimatum, actually, if we're going to throw Doug under the bus here. He said that he said you had to like baseball, so you did. And that was kind of what we were hoping to hear about.
I mean, I guess that he may have said that, but I was just like, okay, whatever. I mean, I didn't dislike baseball, but I wasn't like an avid fan. But I have learned a lot.
Interesting. Well, he probably felt good that you liked baseball and showed the interest. Does that also follow with his barbecue pitmaster lifestyle? Or
I mean, I try to help him out with that, but he always just shakes his head and is like, let me do it. So, which I'm fine with because I don't really like cooking anyway.
No, talk about the good life. You get somebody in your life that cooks you good food.
Exactly.
Well, you sit on the couch, watch Community, play with the dog. I mean, what more
Yeah,
do you want?
nothing.
And then if he acts up, you cyanide poison him.
Yeah. It's a very
Oh,
painful way to die, but sure.
well, I guess he'd really upset you. You dated for 5 years. Let's talk about that. Was that difficult? Was that you keeping Doug at arm's distance and then he finally Stockholmed you enough? Or how does that work for you? Or how did that
Well,
work?
we started dating when I was really young, and I was always someone who was like, I'm not going to get married till I'm 30, because I don't know. That just seemed like a good age. And I thought too many people I know were getting married too young. And then, so we dated for 5 years, like while I was in college. And then when I moved back, and then after that, I was like, well, it's been long enough. It's a good enough time. So it wasn't really hard. I mean, long distance was a little hard for 2 years, I guess. Towards the end of it, I was very sick of that. Driving 2 hours away, which isn't even that far, but it adds up after a while.
That is a bit of a commute.
Yeah.
So, what did you do before you became this scientist? Was there a stepping stone? I'm sorry, that was a drastic change of pace, but it just hit me. Was there like a jumping stone where you're able to say, hey, here's these creds I have. You should totally trust me with, in my mind, the almighty power of math and science because it's like magic to me? Or do those jobs just get given out to whoever asks for it?
Complicated in the science world. I at first wanted to do medical stuff, and then I decided against that. And so I just got my degree in chemistry because I was like, well, everyone's talking about STEM. STEM's the future, STEM's where the money's at. I didn't look into it that much, and it turns out there's not that many jobs in lab work, and a lot of them you have to have specific certifications for. So in medical labs, I couldn't work there because I have to have a license to work in the medical lab. And then there's all sorts of like cosmetic labs and research labs, but they all want you to have like very specific things to work in that lab. So I'm not really sure because I just kind of fell into this job, and my manager is very chill, so he just kind of let me do it. I'm not sure about other labs, how stringent they are. I'm guessing it's kind of like every job where they list a bunch of things that they want you to have. They want you to have the certification specifically in cosmetic science, which is like, who has that? But they'll probably just hire you anyway, I guess, if you have a degree in science. That's what I'm hoping anyway, if I have to change careers.
Gotcha. Well, that's pretty cool. You have a pretty standard 8 to 5, it sounds like, and it sounds pretty interesting.
I guess.
What would you say to people who want to do what you do? What kind of advice would you give another young child who is like, man, Christy's the coolest. I want to be like her when I grow up. Or, Andrew, who would like to learn how to do math.
I'd probably say if you want to work in a lab, to just have a clear idea and do your research on what kind of certifications or backgrounds they're going to be looking for that lab work, because research labs typically want you to have a master's or PhD. Medical labs, they want you to get a medical lab certification. And so I would just be really specific about what you want. And if that doesn't work out, you can always become a teacher, is what I've been told.
Well, and one thing that you said earlier that I feel like is worth sharing with the young ones, the youths, is the fact that the job that you got because you just emailed everybody, and you didn't just say, oh well, like there's not a job posted on Indeed or whatever, so I guess I don't get to work in a lab. Like, you took steps to really initiate and to be proactive, and I think that's really important. And so I'm curious now that you've landed the job working at the lab, do you have a next step that you're aiming for? Are you thinking, okay, maybe I do want to go ahead and get this certification and what did you say, cosmetology? What's the next step that you're aiming for?
This lab is pretty small, so there's not a lot of spaces to like be promoted to unless somebody just leaves. So I like that job and I like the people I work with. So if there was a place to promote, I wouldn't mind doing that. Otherwise, if I wanted to stay in Amarillo, I'd probably try to get on at Pantex because they pay big money. And that just sounds like a really cool job to have. But other than that, I don't know what my next step is, honestly. I'm just kind of out here floating, seeing what's out there. I might try to keep working in a lab. I've looked into other avenues I could go down. such as teaching, or I don't know, the Amarillo Chemical Society is always posting 20 things you can do with your chemistry degree that aren't in the lab. So I look into those every once in a while. But I think I'm just one of those people that doesn't necessarily always have a plan. So I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go right now.
Yeah. And that's so funny because that's so different than me. And I do want to ask some about that too. So you're the youngest sibling, and we only have about 5 years between us. So it's not like a crazy distance. We like spent time in the same house. We were rarely at the same school, if ever,
Yeah.
but not like a crazy, just Puckett. And of between me, you, and Beth, you're the only one that wasn't homeschooled. And so how do you feel like that impacted what your personality ultimately was? The fact that you were in public school the whole way through, the fact that you were the youngest, and Beth and I were a little bit closer in age. Like, how do you see that sort of shaping some of what your personality ultimately ended up being?
Well, I hadn't ever been asked that before until you asked me earlier, so I had to think about it for a little bit. But I feel like there's pros and cons, obviously, to homeschooling versus public school. But I think maybe one of the cons is I don't think that I really got to have a chance to determine my own personality when I was young because, one, you're trying to fit in with all your classmates and be accepted, and two, it's like other people are going to decide your personality and then you almost have to just live up to it. And that happened to me time and time again, where people, I guess because I was like shy at first, they would just assume that I was like really booky and really like quiet and just introverted and loved to read and like loved school. And I hated school. I was just really good at it. But I tried to fit this mold of being that stereotype for so long that it took me a while to realize that I do like sports. Because for the longest time, I was like, well, school people don't like sports, so I need to just stick to my role. But I feel like maybe homeschoolers, and maybe it's why other people find them to be so weird sometimes, maybe they like have a chance to just break their own mold and be their own person quicker than other people. So it seems odd because no one else is doing that. Everyone else is just trying to be the exact same as everybody else.
Yeah, it's possible. I feel like some of that mold still gets created by your family.
Oh, yeah. I think like people's first impression of you is the impression they will have forever. And with family, especially like whatever you were when you were young is what you're going to be forever, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes some like really intentional effort to change that up if you want to change that up. And I mean, that's something we've talked about with some other guests in the past is when you meet friends and meet people, there's this sort of perception of you that maybe is different than what you have with family. But then when you go back to family, you kind of go back to the person that you were your entire life. Like you just slide right back into that mold.
Yeah, for sure. Different personalities for different groups.
Yeah. It's kind of tiring. I try to just make them all the same where I can.
Yeah, it can be advantageous for work at least, because sometimes you don't want your actual personality to come out if you're like crazy loud and you work quiet office, like you need to adjust. But
or just don't work in a quiet office.
Yeah, that's also true, but some people don't know.
So as we were talking about this episode, our mom specifically wanted to talk about you being a girl scientist, which, you're just a scientist, right? No such thing as girl scientist. You're all scientists. But no, in all seriousness, have you noticed either in your workplace or going through and getting a chemistry degree at Tech, was it a scenario where, you were the only girl in the small groups, or what does the dynamic of your office look like?
So in school, I noticed my science classes were about 50-50, and a lot of the girls were either, well, in general, were either going to go into the medical field or go get their PhD. In my math classes, they were typically full of engineers, and a lot of times I was like one of three girls in there. And those were the classes where I felt like I was being singled out a little, especially because, not to brag, but I did do really well in calculuses. So, or calculi, whatever. I'm not an English person. So I would always make one of the highest grades. And a lot of times when you make one of the highest grades, they'll call it out in class and tell people for whatever reason. I don't know, competition. So I did get some dirty looks, but I don't know if that was because I was a girl or just because they were like mad that I did well. But the guy next to me was definitely weird about it. But I noticed more like kind of weirdness in college than I do in my workplace. Everybody seems really chill there. It's 50% girls, 50% boys. I haven't really noticed anybody being weird towards me because I'm a woman. So I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. But glad mom is out there for the ladies supporting.
Yeah, I feel like in an ideal world, it'd be great if it is something where you don't have to think about it. And that's great. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And shout out to Susie for repping for the women and, supporting the podcast, getting us on here. Honestly, I think Susie might have been more excited about Christy coming on than Christy has been about coming on. Very excited about it.
I mean, I did take notes. So,
oh, wow.
I came prepared.
You're doing better than me. It's a good start. So, what do you do outside of work? We've talked a whole lot about what you do during the things that bring you money, but part of Dead by Tomorrow is we want that good work-life balance, and we want to talk about the things that people do outside of how they make money. So what would you say your claim to fame or whatever you want to call it is whenever you clock out?
I think, I'm pretty just chill normally on the weekends. I'll just hang out with friends, and there's not a ton of stuff to do in Amarillo, but we'll try to go out and try new things and stuff like that. But my main thing that I think Doug and I both like to do is travel. So we always plan at least one big trip a year. This year we're going to Hawaii. So I think that's probably what I spend like most time thinking about and wanting to do. And we always go to Denver and Dallas a couple times a year too. We went to Dallas several times this year because of my niece. So I think that's definitely what we like to spend our money on, and we like to spend our time planning and thinking about.
I like it. So when are y'all going to Hawaii? What are you going to do? Which island? Whose idea was it?
We're going to Oahu in August. We had both talked about several times going to Hawaii, and then we were like, well, it's very expensive, so we'd have to save pretty heavily. And then the stimulus checks happened, and so we just put all of that towards Hawaii. We have a Southwest credit card, so we got like all these points that we could practically fly there for free. So it just worked out timing wise, and we're just planning on hitting all the tourist spots, Pearl Harbor. We're going to swim with sharks. We're going to go to the North Shore, get some shave ice, as they call it. They don't put the D on there for some reason. Go to a luau, all the stuff that you see in the movies.
I like it. Hawaii's pretty cool. That's good. So you'd say y'all are kind of travelers, and it's a hard claim, like it's a hard thing to put because you don't get to travel every night after work. It takes patience and I'm going to say fortitude. You have to be willing to wait and continue moving towards a goal that is not immediate. And sometimes it can be a year out. So is there anything you guys do to stay strong on this, or are y'all just both workhorses at saving money and planning trips?
Doug is not a workhorse at saving money. But
finally, some shots being fired.
I am the one that saves the money. But normally we'll just plan like once a week. We would set aside some time to like research stuff. And he's like very into planning trips. It's his number one activity. So he really likes to do that and look into all this stuff, do all this research, and make sure that we're getting the best out of whatever city we're going to. But I guess I'm pretty good at, I don't know what you would call it, but having some grand plan like years away. I'm good at keeping the course and just accomplishing little goals and getting towards the big goal at the end. I would say I'm better at that. So it doesn't bother me that much.
Okay, Christy, we are now to the part of the podcast where we tell stories. And by we, I mostly mean you tell stories. So interested to hear a story, either you can tell a story about Andrew and I. We're egotistical. We're always happy to hear those. Or if you have other stories about work things or travel life, whatever that might be, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, I know Andrew wants to shame Daniel and have a sad or bad story, but I
One of
really
these
can't
days.
I can't remember anything too bad that Daniel did in my childhood. I feel like I honestly don't remember you being there all that much. I think you were out
Wow, abandonment.
you were out with friends a lot. But I remember one time I was on the swing outside because I was always outside, I feel like, and I busted my knee up so bad on the tree and was bawling. And for whatever reason, mom and dad did not want to deal with my cut. And so I remember you were like 10 or something, and you grabbed the iodine, and I was freaking out because I thought I was going to burn so bad because I thought it was like rubbing alcohol. And you're like, no, I promise it won't hurt. And I was like, I don't believe you. And then you poured it on my leg, and I was like, oh, it really doesn't hurt. And then cleaned me up, and I was all good. And that's basically what I remember from childhood of Daniel, was just him being nice to me, I guess.
I'm going to
For the
say
most
that
part.
that sparked your interest in chemistry. I'm going to claim that right now.
Yeah, I'm like, why does this cleaning thing not hurt? And why has no one used it on me before?
There, Daniel.
I know. I don't know what mom and dad were doing. Maybe they weren't home. I also remember Beth in the background also freaking out because I'm sure she's the one that shoved me into the tree.
Dang.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
It's probably a situation where that, like, Beth did that, and then she was freaking out about being in trouble. Maybe mom and dad like left me to watch it all, and so I knew I had to take care of things well, otherwise we wouldn't get to hang out at home without a babysitter anymore.
Classic older brother. But you also tried to light things on fire all the time outside and almost lit the propane tank on fire while I was inside.
I don't remember that either, but this also sounds like something that's sparking your interest in chemistry. Just a lot of chemicals.
I was a little pyromaniac as a child. I would go to the park and start fires all the time with my friend.
Like what?
They're just like little fires.
What kind of
just
fires
little
are we
ones.
talking about?
Just ones like under the tree, just little babies. Little...
Under the tree.
That way, no one could see us. They had those grills up there, you know, so we'd put stuff in there and just see what it did if it caught on fire. Listen, I turned out fine, so I don't know about her, but I'm perfectly normal now.
Now you work in a laboratory full of flammable chemicals, and
yeah,
it's all fine.
There's no fires in there. You can't have an open fire in there anyway, so it's fine.
One step away from arsonist is what I'm hearing.
That's an accurate term. They were worried about it at the elementary. They were like, who keeps lighting all this stuff on fire in the park? Leaving all these remnants.
I'm just going to put this out here, Christy. Daniel and I were not the most well-behaved children.
Oh, I know.
I
remember.
don't think either of us ever got any teachers or principals' attention for, like where the school's like, we got to hunt down this person and figure out who's up to this. That never fell on us or anything. So,
well, I think they knew it was me, but they didn't do anything about it. So that's on them.
I'd be surprised if they did, because whenever a school is looking for somebody lighting fires under trees, I feel like they're stereotyping for a very specific type of person. I don't feel like you fit that mold.
No, they're normally boys, like teenage boys.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. If someone told me back then that Christy was an arsonist, I would have laughed very hard and then not believed them.
Yeah, we also used to dismantle the soccer goals and then hide all the nuts and bolts in this neighbor's vines. Do you remember that? Cool. Do you remember that house on the very end of the street that had those vines that went all the way up the house? We hid a lot of stuff in those vines.
I'm getting new faces of Christy I never expected.
What other like civil disobediences did you do growing up?
I really don't think that I did all that much. I think it was just those. I mean, we would ride around. What a nice
word for crime.
It wasn't that bad. We never started anything serious. They did eventually take out those soccer goals and never put them back up, but that could have been for different reasons.
I'm just amazed. That's definitely not what I expected to hear, and it's something I had no idea happened. I'm sure that mom is in the same boat, so after she listens to this episode, I look forward to getting a text saying, oh, it's one of those don't tell mom stories that came out in the podcast, because we're always like, Mom, we don't have any stories like that. We told you everything. But Christy, you were holding out on us.
I told her once, I mean, I don't know if I told her about the soccer goals, but I told her about the fires. I used to carry like a knapsack with a lighter, which no one realized was missing from the house, and like random flammable things. And they just thought I was just carrying a bag for no reason to the park.
Daniel, I think you almost died as a child, and it was not for any of the reasons I expected.
Yep, you're right.
Wow. This is revolutionary.
Well, you're welcome.
All
Does
right.
Doug know about this?
Does who? Doug? Oh, yeah. We
Yeah.
bonded over our pyromaniacness.
What? Doug too?
Pyromaniacy? Yeah.
Oh, that I'm expect
That's
these
the
things
least,
from.
yeah, that's the least surprising thing from Doug. He did much worse. He got
Yeah.
cops called on him, so.
Wow. We're going to go redo an episode with him. He did not talk about any illegal activities last week.
Well,
I mean,
he may have to tell you that in private, statute of limitations.
he basically murdered a duck. That seems pretty.
That is.
That's true.
Bruno.
God bless that duck.
Every time he passed by the Discovery Center, he points it out.
That's a little dramatic for him, then it sounds like.
It really is.
Oh, man. Well, all right. Unless you have other stories, and it doesn't have to be of you lighting things on fire. You can share happier stories too if you want. I don't have anything to say to that. So
if this building catches fire, I know what happened.
I'm almost scared to give you this offer, but we do like to ask, is there a challenge that you would like to give to our audience members? And generally the vibe we're going for is, living your life to the fullest and things like that, which again sounds, I don't know what you're going to say with this, but what challenge would you like to give to our audience?
Well, originally I was going to tie it back to my work, but I feel like I barely even talked about that. But I was going to say to just be a little more interested in the world, find out where your food comes from, how it gets made. Or I just encourage people, because everybody always says that they didn't like science and they hated it in school. But if you have something that you enjoy, like cars or computers or whatever, science is like everywhere. So you can always find out how those things work and the science behind them. And that will get you interested in science.
Okay. I love it. I'm trying to think of what I need to find out.
You like sports. There's tons of science with sports.
That's true. If I was reliving my college experience, I would love to go into a kinesiology type of field. I think that would be
cool.
Super cool. But I'm not going back to school, Christy. Sorry for your challenge. Can't do it, but
I don't want to go back to school either.
I'll find some YouTube videos. Well, Christy, thank you for coming on to the podcast and telling us a little bit about what it's like to work in the lab, what it's like to actually use your degree for your job, telling us about all of the fires that you apparently started in Amarillo and all the reasons why people should fear you. So it's been a pleasure having you on and just hearing your stories. So thank you for coming by.
See you later.
And to all of our audience members, thank you for listening in. If you want to learn more about Christy and learn more about her job, we'll have some links in the show notes. If you want to come on the podcast, just let us know. We're happy to talk to you, but you're going to have to top cyanide creation, and that's a tough bar to clear. So thank you guys for listening, and we hope you have a great day.